These are the unbelievable hacks in Minecraft that require absolutely zero mods, starting with a fully functioning car. And the way this works is by building 4 different versions of the car and then checking which way that the player's moving using command blocks to then set down that car relative to the player. So if you need to turn, it generates a car that's 90-degree rotation, and then it just follows along with you, all the while we're able to fully stand within the car and move along with it. And while it definitely isn't the fastest way to travel in Minecraft, and an Iceboat Highway is a lot easier to build and a lot faster, when it looks this cool, it's hard to beat. This Minecraft elevator works so smoothly that you'll think that it's broken, since when we step inside and press the button, when the doors close, you wouldn't even notice that you've gone down to the lower floor until you stepped out. And the reason for that is that instead of standing on blocks, we're actually standing on a combination of an invisible armor stand with a block as its head and an invisible shulker entity. And then by teleporting them just a tiny amount slowly down or up, we're able to carry the player to her destination without even noticing what's happening. And luckily, the original user who posted this, Logdog, actually has the 2 commands that they used to build this linked at the original Reddit post. So if you want to figure out the time with command blocks, this is how you would do it. Here's how to make animated textures in vanilla Minecraft. All it's going to take is a lot of maps, since if you don't lock one of these maps, then it is possible for it to update on side of the texture. And Fast Vincent 1 is a great video outlining one of the many ways to do this, like using water since it updates quickly. But if you then go and use commands to swap out the textures even better, then we can take after this Reddit user SGHQ and make any kind of animation that we want in basically whatever pixel quality that we want right inside of your world. Good stuff. This signpost isn't from a mod, but it looks like it should be. And the way we were able to make it so convincingly is following after Razor Dawn's example and using a bunch of armor stands holding sticks like this to then connect with the sign texture that's upside down to make it look like the sign is hanging from above. And of course, the original post was made 5 years ago, so now we actually have hanging signs that we could use to do here. And in that way, the shading on the sign would be a lot more accurate to the texture. And then if you wanted to, using a floating name entity like Seth Blink's shown off using armor stands in the past as well, we could also make it so that these signs are readable in some way, making it even easier to give your players direction inside of your next build. How do I make this arcade machine using 0 mods? Oh, the answer's a lot simpler and a lot stupider than you might think. Since while building the frame of the machine's actually pretty easy, you just use a block of your choice and an upside down stair like so, what really sells this is having an armor stand that's tucked in, facing away from us wearing a helmet. Because the back of the diamond helmet works surprisingly well as a lit up screen. And if you then went ahead and used the item replace command to change out the helmet that's on top of that armor stand, you could even animate the screen to change into different colors. But even just a single one like this can more than sell the illusion. With just 2 dispensers, we're going to be able to make a blender inside of your Minecraft kitchen. All we got to do is place down a solid block with a glass block on top, and then by facing in 2 dispensers and powering them at the same time, they'll be able to dispense the armor stand that's inside, place it down, and we'll have laid it out perfectly to have the blending mechanism right inside of this glass block. Unlike in the Minecraft trailers, we're not able to actually see ourselves using the anvil on our weapons. Or we couldn't until today. Since with the help of the armor stands, or using something like the Armor Statures data pack from Vanilla Tweaks, we can align an armor stand just right to have the sword in its hand placed perfectly flush against the top of the anvil. And while you could try for the same effect using an invisible item frame, I think you'll find that the depth here of the sword looks a lot better than just having it be tiny when it's in its sprite form. Here's how a couple of anvils can make your base invincible. Since, as it turns out, anvils have a high enough blast resistance where they're able to completely negate the explosion that would come from something like an end crystal or TNT. And you can see as much from this example. We can completely protect the dirt blocks, which would otherwise get destroyed by just having a ring of anvils like so. And if you want to go one further, if you want to completely disarm that piece of TNT that your friend lit off, then by dropping an anvil into the same space, that'll contain all of the blast damage, just also costing you 31 iron ingots. This phone booth isn't what it looks like, but instead when you step inside, you'll find out that you'll be kitted out just the same way as Superman. And the reason for this is because we're using a command block underneath the phone booth like so that tests for a player that's standing on top of this block. And if that's the case, then it'll give us a full set of armor and give us a complete set of strength as well, giving you a Superman transition without ever having to use mods inside of your world. How do we build this keyboard in Minecraft? Well, it's not through the help of mods, but instead it's entirely down to custom player heads. Since using the commands that we'll put down in the description and on screen here, you're able to type these into a command block and give yourself player heads that then, when you put on top of armor stands, can be overlapped with blocks to cover up the armor stand and just show the parts of the player head that you want to see. And then then to make yourself a cool little desk chair, what you could do is use something like a debug stick to take these 3 iron trap doors that we place alongside the stair and change the NBT data so that they're always open, meaning that they're always going to be alongside your chair even if they're not powered. How did I put my face on a jack-o'-lantern? Well, it has nothing to do with custom texture pack, and instead, the way that we can make custom textures in vanilla Minecraft is by using invisible map art. And the way that we build this is that if you go out into the void that's in between the end islands and the end main island, then when you create a map there, you'll notice that all the parts that are void won't fill in on the map. So if we just place blocks where we want it to be, then by taking that invisible map art and putting it inside of an invisible item frame that you get with this command, we can lay that onto our pumpkin and get ourselves our own unique texture laid on the face. Don't trust this floor, since what might look like a mirror that you get with ray tracing shaders is actually possible with a lot of dedication. Since what's really happening here is that by placing glass blocks like this, we can separate the 2 halves of our build and then recreate everything upside down underneath. And folks, the way that you sell this is entirely in the little details. Like if you got item frames, they're able to be rotated in 8 different directions. And while it's a thing that costs twice the amount of blocks to do, it also costs 0 mods, so I'm happy for that as well. Villagers are rarely well behaved, and because of that, it's hard to put some of them into your builds without having it immediately turn into a wrangling exercise trying to get them all in place. And since we're not able to use leads on them, a much better solution if you're in creative is instead using the mob tag no AI to then spawn in villagers in just the right positions that you want them to be. And you can even rotate them so that they're looking in the right areas that you want to have them. And just with a few commands like that, you're able to add a lot of world building to your build without ever having to worry about them running off. This isn't a shield, it's actually a sign. Or it's going to be when we use it like this. Since following after MN Sweet's advice, what we could do is use armor stands to angle our shields in such a way where we then use armor stands of other varieties to hold our items on top of them. And now we've got unique shelves, or even a sign that you put outside on the sidewalk in front of your new shop. And so if you're playing on a server that uses the Vanilla Tweaks Armor Statues data pack, this could make all the difference for how you decorate your shop. This flower pot is illegal, but how did we get it in vanilla Minecraft? Well, while you could use a resource pack like the original post, it's actually entirely possible to make this using armor stands. Since by having the armor stand have the flower pot on its head, we can then angle the armor stand in any direction that we want it to be, which takes what would have been a boring flower pot and makes it into a moment where I'm fine to stop and smell the roses. Here's why you should sleep with a skeleton head. Well, let me explain. Since by using armor stands with skeleton heads facing away from the outside of your house, we can then overlap a bed just right on top of their texture and use those skeleton heads as pretty convincing pillows. I mean, I don't imagine they're particularly comfy, but they definitely sell the illusion, and that's good enough for me. You've heard of the Sword of the Stone, but what about the Netherite sword and the respawn anchor? Man, it's not exactly as popular of a myth, but by using an armor stand holding its item upside down, we can have it so that we can place any item inside of the portal top of the respawn anchor. And perhaps my favorite part is that because we're able to grab things out of armor stand's hands, when you walk up, you always feel like you're worthy. Hard to put a price on that. These shadows are not real, and really, they're entirely possible inside of survival. All we're doing here is using deep slate brick underneath stone brick to create a shadow-like feel underneath our stairs. And I honestly think this works so well that even knowing how it works, it's hard for me to point out that it actually doesn't belong. And so if you're sick of leaving floating stairs inside of your build, then by having another set of floating stairs underneath them, it adds both support and added detail. Very nice. Armor stands don't make for very good training dummies, or they didn't until now. Since by taking after Theo tries, if we take a number of these armor stands and align them just right, it's particularly easy to pose the armor stands and then push them into place so that just their arms stick out of these andesite walls. And just like that, we've got a training dummy that you could use to practice martial arts. And if you're on Java Edition, you could do this just as well. You're just gonna have to use commands instead of doing it in the base game. Do not swing this sword. Or if you're going to, at least do it over water. Since the way that Mysticat made this helicopter sword is that whenever you swing with the sword, it takes you up into the sky and rotates you using command blocks. But since they made this, we did since get the mace, which now actually does benefit us from being high up in the air. So who knows, maybe it's a good excuse to combo the two of them, turning what would have been a joke item into the final blow that you might need. Through the help of a minecart and a strider, we're able to get ourselves a functioning swing in Minecraft. Let me explain. First, we're going to start off by building this archway of fences above where we want it. And then, after digging a V shape into the ground like this, we can add on our powered rails and then have a minecart go back and forth over the V. easy. At which point we add a saddled strider to the minecart, then with a couple of rabbits on ropes tucked down there with it, we can use moss carpet to cover up the whole mess, and then throw down an invisibility potion to finish it off. And there you go, hop on the saddle and you've got yourself a working swing. Just don't expect to go very high off of it. It's more of a close to the ground kind of thing. One of the key parts of speedrunning is a quick Ender Dragon fight. I mean, how are you gonna reach the top of the leaderboard if you can't one-cycle this foe? But while most of us think that beds are the fastest way to beat the baddie, there's actually a much stranger option. Leave it to the crazy minds of the Minecraft technical community to make up this monstrosity. The TNT Arrow Launcher, more affectionately referred to as the Rail Cannon. Being able to deal roughly 1,200 points of damage in a single blow, this machine can one-hit the Ender Dragon. And in fact, the only hope that anyone has of surviving this thing is a Totem of Undying. But if you can't cheat death, then this will take you to a swift one. Nobody likes waiting, especially with nether portals. After all, you not only have to wait for the sickness animation, but then you also gotta let the other side generate as well. And it's a pain for sure. But luckily, you can take any old garbage item, toss it through, and then let that do the loading for you, saving you time and giving that dirt block a purpose. Redstone is one of my favorite parts of Minecraft, but the circuitry isn't exactly a looker. Now, that doesn't discount its personality. I'm sure what's on the inside counts. But to our builder friends, it's all about outward appearances. So in that case, how about we find ourselves a happy middle ground? I wasn't aware of this until recently, but you can actually throw down item frames atop a redstone dust. Meaning if you add in a colored map of your choice, then you can effectively cover up your tracks. Now obviously, if you're using a bunch of these item frame and map combos, I do have to warn of some potential lag. But if you got yourself a beefy computer, then I'd be hard pressed to say this isn't worth a shot. Minecraft has blocks and it has mobs, and oftentimes you don't see the two sides mix, but that changes today. Since with the help of cleverly coded falling sand entities and armor stands, this Reddit user was capable of animating a proper functional jumping piston mob. And folks, this isn't done with any mods or resource packs, but in fact, it's fully possible using just command blocks or data pack in vanilla, and the results are equal parts ridiculous and impressive to see. And honestly, this just feels like a Pixar reference waiting to happen. Snow golems melt in the desert. That's not much of a surprise. Even Frosty the Snowman could have told you that. But what you might be surprised to know is that if you use a fire resistance potion, that'll allow your snow golems to survive in hot climates. And yes, that even includes the nether, as silly as it might seem. So if you have a couple of these lying around after a piglin bartering, you could set up a couple of snow golems, splash them with this, and use those to help you eviscerate through that blaze spawner. Just get ready for the rude awakening when the potion effect wears off, and you're left with nothing more than a pile of snowballs in front of you. I guess nothing good ever lasts, huh? When we talk about Minecraft traps, cake probably isn't top of your list. But here's why it should be. Since silly as it may seem, if you trap your friend in a case of cake like this, and then replace the floor underneath them with a piece of soul sand, then when we add in a water source block, we'll have trapped them inside of a bubble stream. And just that little bit of bouncing around is gonna make it very tough to break the cake. And at that point, their best way out is if they're hungry. Which I've never seen anyone eat a full cake in Minecraft, so they might be there for a while. Giants in Minecraft have not worked in a very long time, and that's intentional. They were left in the code, but they were intentionally given no AI. But now with the scale attribute command, we're able to take a zombie and then scale it up to giant size, and it'll have AI. You can even use the attribute commands to change its speed, its health, basically making your own boss mob inside of your world. I just wouldn't recommend doing like this user and giving it speed of a scale 3. Something about a giant zombie freaking out at the top of a ravine is horrifying in any update. I'm glad Mojang never added in this version of the giant. From where we're standing, this base doesn't look that hidden, but from the ground level, these shulker boxes that we used as a floor actually start to disappear. And the reason is that block entities like shulker boxes and chests stop rendering when you're 64 blocks away. So if you put some of these up near the top of the sky, they'll only render if someone gets within range. So unless they got an elytra, and they're flying pretty high up, might I add, they'll be none the wiser that you're hiding out here. And hey, with all those shulker boxes, you got built-in storage too, so there's worse blocks that you could be stuck with. Planting trees around your base can really bring a build together, especially if you design some of them custom. That is, until your friend comes by and decides to break the bottom 2 logs of the tree trunk for a craft. And now, all you got is a bunch of eyesores. Well, to solve that problem, let's teach them a one-time lesson that the Lorax would even approve of. By setting up an observer system like such, we can have it so that when they break the log, the chop gets recognized, and then an explosion takes care of the rest. And better yet, by using TNT minecarts in this way, the detonation gets to near instantaneous levels. So, whichever log they take from you, we can make sure it'll be there last. With this one-way glass, we can see in, and the criminals can't see out. Let me explain. Without using any mods, all we need are some tinted glass blocks to help us get the effect. And if you place a wall of tinted glass on a build like so, all we need to do is make sure that one side has enough light and the other one is completely dark. That way, when you stand on one side of the glass, glass, you're only going to see that darkness, while on the other, you can see perfectly through as planned. Let's say you need to move your pet dog, but you don't want to risk it dying while you're running across the treacherous landscape. Well, no worries, RaceWorks has you covered. Since by attaching your pet to a lead and then that lead to a fence post, we can use a piston like this so that when the item despawns, then your pet will suddenly teleport that long distance just like that. And through the help of a chunk loader like this one, we can make sure that this design never unloads. That way, with whatever timer you build, it's gonna work just fine. And most importantly, it means your feline friend can travel thousands of blocks, all without having to move a muscle. Can't say I'm not a little bit jealous. Throughout history, Minecraft has had its fair share of cannons. Whether you're caving holes with a TNT launcher or creating a nuisance with a sand cannon, there are plenty of different ways to launch projectiles in the game. And as it turns out, the 1.17 update offers up an even newer addition to that category. As I'm sure you know, these dripstone blocks are not to be messed with. But better still is that we're able to launch these using slime blocks and pistons. Even with a small one like this, the momentum that we add in here could be just enough to make the option lethal. So while everyone else is worried about the differences between stalactites and stalagmites, you'll know that their best application truly is as bullets. Did you know that you could do this with bubble streams? Because apparently, if you throw eggs directly at the water, those projectiles will ricochet and bounce along the bubbles. And functionally, this is a lot like an ender pearl stasis chamber, but we're just using a lot more momentum when we throw it out. Which means if you make a couple of baskets, you might be able to set this up for your very own basketball game. And hey, since it works with other entities, with the right amount of force, this could be the wild addition for your next TNT cannon. Although trapdoors are made out of wood, they don't burn in lava. Yeah, I don't get the logic either, but we don't have to understand it to know that we can use this to get ourselves quite a bit of diamonds. Since whenever you come across a lava pool, all you have to do is just bring around a crimson or warp trapdoor like this, and then flip it open to get yourself the diamonds at the bottom of the lava lake. But just be careful, because even if the trapdoor doesn't burn, your diamonds definitely could. By linking nether portals in a specific way, we're able to make it so that we can give one portal two destinations depending on where you stand on it. And this is going to become a lot more obvious if we use something like a tall nether portal. Because here we could have it that if we stand at the top of the portal with a secret place, then that'll be the only way we teleport to our secret base. But if you go through it normally, you go to the standard location of a nether fortress. Besides, whoever wants to teleport through the top half of the portal anyway? If you design it right, they'll just think you made a tall nether portal for show, and your secret's safe from there. This composter doesn't look like much, but it's actually my base. Don't believe me? Here, I'll show you. If we just step inside and throw an item right into place, a hidden hopper minecart will trigger and cause this redstone machine to push us right into place. And bam, hidden entrance. And while it's hard to notice what's happening from above, this Reddit user's post makes the mechanics a lot more obvious. Just make sure you place this in a village where it makes sense for there to be a composter. Otherwise, this hidden base could just stick out like a sore thumb. Traversing the nether is a tricky business, and the open fields of lava don't make that any easier. So if a strider isn't your style, then this method is well worth a shot. See, as coded, we get something of a lava boat to use in the second dimension. And while it's ridiculous, it's hard to say that a Frostwalker boat wouldn't be cool to try. I mean, I'd even love to use that in the overworld, let alone the nether. And being able to drift to the nether fortress in style is a great addition, no doubt. Now, it's commonplace knowledge by this point, you don't place a bed in the nether. I mean, that's just intentional game design. But then it might be a surprise to see this not explode in the end. See, what's happening here is that in Bedrock, it's actually possible to disable this intentional feature through a hidden command. And now in 1.18, we can keep our beds safe by changing the game rule respawn blocks explode to false. And then whether we're interacting with the bed in the nether or respawn anchor in the overworld, neither will explode anymore. And even though we still can't sleep in them even with this changed, at least the villagers can. If you're like me, then you're terrible with a bow and arrow. And unfortunately for us, that makes it really tough to get this advancement for the bullseye. Don't worry, this will make it simple. Since all we need to do is put a trapdoor on top of our target block, shoot an arrow right into the center, and then once we run 30 blocks away, we can have either a friend or redstone flip the trapdoor open. At which point it counts it as if we shot the arrow from back here, and we easily get the advancement. And hey, you can do the same for the sniper duel achievement as well. Just switch out the target block for a different kind of target. Easy as that. According to Mojang, we're never going to see chairs in the base game, but this seems to do the trick. And the secret here is an invisible llama. See, given the L-like shape of the llama's neck and body, we can make a pretty convincing armchair to match them up. And if you're worried about the glitchy llama coming out of the side of the chair, it's nothing an invisibility potion and some banners can't fix. So if you're trying to gather the knights at your round table, this is a lot more convincing than crouching on a stair. Minecraft has plenty of doors, but what about a dog door? Well, if you want one of these in your base, all you gotta do is break a 1x1 hole where you want the door, and then place place a sign inside like so, and then place a block on each side of the hole, and then place down a 1x1 painting to cover it up. After that, you'll have the perfect sized door for your dog. It'll also be perfectly hidden, as long as no one goes punching for it. By using a repeating command block to summon in a bunch of wind charges with no direction above this command block, then as soon as we merge it so that they actually have a direction with this command here, the combined force of all of those wind charges will shoot us right up out of render distance. So I hope you have an elytra, otherwise this would have just been Team Rocket blasting off again. Now clearly mushrooms can have a use in the different stews we make, but the mushroom blocks, that's hard to justify. Though if you have Silk Touch, you might want to consider this the next time you're in a dark forest. See, these blocks can be used as something of a fuel source, so if you're just gonna throw them away, might as well let it work for you. Now this wolf's tail is spinning, but why? Well, to answer that, we first need to know that a tamed wolf's tail is linked to its health. So the lower its health, the lower the tail. And conversely, if we use commands to make it have a higher health, yeah, the tail starts spinning. So if you were to use the effect commands to give the dog both health boost and regeneration, we could watch its tail spin in real time. Just don't get dizzy when you try to watch it. In Java Edition, we trade with piglins like this, but on Bedrock Edition, we can do it so much faster. And the reason for that is that if you place down 2 observers to create an infinite clock, and then attach to that a sticky piston with a gold block on top of it, then when you throw the gold to the piglins to trade, you'll see that they're trading every single tick that's possible. So if you've got enough gold to fund it, I'd say pay up. You get yourself quite the show. With the help of commands, it's possible to make fully functional armadillo soccer in Minecraft. All we gotta use is a command so that the armadillo is permanently stayed rolled up. And then at that point, when you run into it like this, as user stably shows off on Reddit, we can sure enough play soccer right in the game itself. And honestly, this puts into perspective just how far we're able to bend it like Beckham with one of these things. And if you're wondering what commands to do for this, then the original user also has that for us in a handy comment that you can see on screen. And also down in the comments, it's worth mentioning this great quote: "He scoots, he scores." Yeah, I didn't know where else that was gonna fit in the video, I just had to say it once I read it. Placing blocks on slabs sounds like a pipe dream. So why does this work? Well, if you use the summon command to get yourself a falling block, you can make sure it lands right where you want it to be. And then after typing the command to summon it into place, you'll have a permanent addition to your slab or stair shelf, which beats the alternative of it floating, just saying. With the recent scale attribute command, we're able to change our size to as small as 0.0625 times what it was. And with that, this user had the great idea of making a mini parkour course that we could do at our small scale. And now what used to be simple jumps and gaps for us when we were regular sized become almost impossible feats at this small scale. And being able to run through things like gaps and stairs is particularly funny to me. Or having to land a Neo jump while you're basically landing into half a block's worth of space. I don't think I could land one of those jumps if you gave me all the space in the world. But for an idea in a new parkour map, I think this is just asking to get used. And even better is that we could also scale ourselves up the other way. Make an entire giant parkour course where you're jumping from skyscrapers. Both of them will be great to see. If you're familiar with the set block command, you've probably come across some neglected blocks. And usually we don't have a reason to spawn one of these odd jobs in. But today, let's put one of them to use in the form of carpet slabs. And sure enough, by using the lower half of a bed block by itself, we can make a convincing, colorful half block slab. With just a composter and a trapdoor, you have an easy way to hide yourself. But unfortunately, just like this, it's not the most effective. You can see yourself popping out of the sides. But nothing to worry about, because if you place blocks on the other sides of the composter like so, we're actually able to hide the player model from clipping out. It just might require some fine tweaking so that you actually get the right rotation. Oh, and while this seems hidden enough, if there's one last thing you should remember, it's that you need to hold sneak even while you're in this cramped spot. Otherwise, your name tag's gonna show up on top. I guess crawling isn't the same as sneaking, go figure. Skulk sensors are very useful, but they're also very noticeable. But if you want to keep their function while losing that fidelity, then it's worth noting that by waterlogging a skulk sensor, then they'll be silent, but still behave normally. Now granted, this doesn't make them entirely discreet since the sound waves are still visible, but as we can verify from the Minecraft subtitles, there's no sound that's given off from the skulk sensor itself when we do this. But when you're trying to use a skulk sensor for a hidden trap like this, then anything you can do to make it less noticeable is gonna go a long way. After all, it just takes one little detail for them to notice and the whole operation to go belly up. And for the price of a water bucket, I'd rather stack those odds in our favor. Fire and water don't mix. I mean, even skeletons know that, so it's not rocket science. But that doesn't explain why a site like this works out. See, through a manipulation of the fluid dynamics system, we can effectively have a fireplace underwater, which is weird for sure, but it does make for a pretty effective trash chute. Now, the way that we set this up is by using a sticky piston and some slime blocks as a temporary shield for the water. And then, after we place down a fire on some netherrack, we can break the piston and the fire will still exist even when the water flows back, giving yet another cursed sight to see. Redstone timers can be a bit complex to build, and while sure there are comparably simpler options like hopper clocks and such, if you're you're really looking to make a no-brainer redstone clock, then this is your candidate. As you'll see, our solution here is gravity, and a violation of the Geneva Convention. By having a mob stand on top of some turtle eggs, there's a set amount of time before they crack. So given that, there is a theory that you could form some kind of timer using turtle eggs. Is it immoral? I guess it doesn't seem the nicest, but if you're really looking for a timer that's light on redstone, this does do the trick. So maybe just keep this behind closed doors and don't let your visitors know how the sausage gets made, alright? Here's how to turn your Allays into a deadly weapon. Since even though they can't equip it, if you give them a piece of Thorn's armor to hold onto, then any mobs that try to attack them will also take damage from that. And as you can see in this example from Razeworks, if you tie your Allay to a lead and then have a mob attack you, you might just have yourself the deadliest balloon in Minecraft. But if you do want to try this out, I have to give one warning, which is that even though the Allays tend to regenerate a lot of health, there are still a few mobs that can kill them off. So to keep them safe and on your side, you might want to have a couple of Allays doing this, that way the damage is getting evenly dispersed amongst the crowd. This item does not exist in Minecraft. So how is it here in vanilla? Well, by utilizing invisible item frames and a transparent map art, you can decorate your house and get an amazing effect. Though to get that transparent map art, you are going to need to head out to the void and make your pixel art there, since that's the only way that we're going to be able to get no background on the PNG. And that'll allow us to make anything from plates on the dinner table, or even signs to scare off our enemies. With the wind charge potion, we're able to make it so that when you kill a mob, it gives off a burst of air. And so, taking that to its logical extreme, what Twisty Master did here is when you give a wind charge potion to a whole bunch of chickens in a 2x2 like this, then by using Sweeping Edge, we're able to use all of those chicken sacrifices to launch ourselves up to 2,000 blocks in the sky. But forget entity cramming, wind charge cramming is definitely the new strat. I mean, if you don't have any qualms about killing this many chickens anyway, it might be worth it. If you're harvesting a bunch of trees, it's easy to build up something of an abundance of saplings. And at some point, it's more than we could feasibly replant. But before you start burning them, consider this. Since saplings age off of a random-based system, we could build something like this to use our saplings as a random redstone generator. And it's the closest we've got to the copper golem. Leather helmets don't serve much of a purpose in a Minecraft run, because in the time it takes to get the leather necessary, most of us are already finding iron in the caves. But with a lack in survival, they make up for in creative. Here we can use command blocks to make our own leather helmet animations, which turns this piece of junk into a work of art. If you're looking for the fastest way to mine in Minecraft, then you're gonna need this on your leggings. Since even though dive mining's become less popular since its inclusion, with the addition of the Swift Sneak enchantment, now it's worth doing again, because the name's misleading. It doesn't just give you a swift sneak, but also gives you a swift crawl. And with Swift Sneak 3 on our leggings, we can get some real speed while we're mining in a 1 block tall tunnel. So as long as you don't have claustrophobia, it's worth adding to your to-do list. At the very least, it gives you a reason to go down to the ancient cities, because if we're being honest, the recovery compass isn't worth it. When you see a grid like this, your first instinct is probably a game of chess or checkers, but that's not what we'll see today. But instead, if we strategically place our crafting tables, we can take after this user and make it seem like one is much bigger than the other, which seems like nonsense at first. But the way that we do this is that when you build these, the squares must be 2 by 2 for each one. And then that way, when one crafting table is placed on the ground, the other can be placed 4 blocks into the air and give us the illusion of size. Bats are notorious for not doing much, and while they can help to find caves, there's not much use for these on the surface. That is, until we add in an invisibility potion. As others have pointed out, these little flying rats can become something to ghosts when they're invisible, letting us get both the flying particle effects and the spooky sounds for your haunted house build. For this Minecraft illusion, you don't have to build anything. It's just gonna cost you 30 bucks, since that's the cost of a Minecraft account. Because truly, just having your skin set to one like this, we're able to make it so that when you look around in F5 and follow the camera, it seems as if the eyes are following you. And the reason for that happening is that we have the hat layer set up in such a way where it parallaxes against the background, making it look as if our eyes are following you, even if our head isn't. We can make this TNT launcher over 3 times better with just this simple trick. See, the problem is that because of the damage that you take in survival mode, we never seem to launch as high as we do in creative. But this user has a perfect solution, since by simply attaching a dispenser full of arrows to shoot us before we launch off, then that little tick of damage is going to make sure that we launch sky high off of one of these things. And if you don't believe me, just look at the comparison. It's pretty jarring. But with either method, it's important to remember. It's great that we have a way to launch ourselves into the air, but you're going to need some way to safely land on the ground. Otherwise, it's a lot less impressive. By this point, we've all seen the Easter egg for naming a mob Dinnerbone. But this time, instead of just turning the mob upside down, it also changed the gravity to boot, which is definitely a wild sight. And yet, it's also surprisingly simple to pull off. See, all that's happening here is that we have a repeating command block that constantly checks for any mobs named Dinnerbone. And then when it finds one, it applies the levitation effect, and poof, they're off just like that, giving us quite the harmless prank to use next time your friend's online. Instead of moving your stuff with hoppers, we're using conveyor belts instead, since with a system of pistons and honey blocks, you can move uncollected items on the floor from one place to another, just as a modded conveyor belt would. And if you want to get really creative, throw on some raw fish and have a brand new sushi bar to impress your friends. Now, lecterns are not something you need to craft in bulk, but if you happen to misclick in a crafting grid, don't sweat it. Here's the solution. Since these share the same bottom texture as the oak planks, we can make something of a rotated pattern in your roof, which I'll admit is a lot better than leaving these lying in a chest. Now, whether you call this GIF or GIF, chances are we've all seen them. And while they're commonplace, in Minecraft, they're a lot more rare, which makes this item frame a real sight to see. Though what's crazier still is that this is all done without using any mods, meaning we can not only play these animations within our world, but we can also record some of our own as well. And while I wouldn't use this to record your next hardcore Let's Play, it's still an amazing feat of Minecraft engineering, and it offers up some hilarious gags as well. We've all seen flying machines, but what about flying platforms? Well, as crazy as it looks, it's actually all capable through specific commands. And better yet, we can even deactivate and reactivate the platform upon command, making room for some new ideas such as a target range trick of the move, which would be quite the challenge for your next Minecraft parkour map. So if you've got the time to set up the command blocks, at least this is all possible without downloading Mod Loader. In Bedrock Edition, if you were to get a baby drowned mob to wear a mob's head, then when it equips it, that head will look ginormous. And there you go, you've got your own kind of a bobblehead in your world. And honestly, I don't know if you'd classify this as more silly or terrifying. I feel like it fits for both. Chorus fruit is a tough food source to justify, and not because of anything with the saturation, but because of the teleportation. And usually it's just too risky to use this when you're not trying to teleport somewhere. That is, unless you eat one of these underwater. Strange as it may seem, by just putting yourself underneath a body of water, then you can eat as much chorus fruit as you want without ever having to teleport from that place. And I don't know why this happens, but I'm also not going to question it if it means that I can survive in the end. Now, how do you think these carpets are floating? I'll give you a hint, it's not string, but instead, this user found out that you can use glow lichen to do the trick. And with their design, we can shed some light on the build and maintain its style without using ugly support blocks. And hey, this might just offer an extra bit of subtle spawn proofing as well. So whether you stop at the patio umbrella or use this for another kind of magic carpet contraption, it's well worth a shot. Watch this fish closely, because in Bedrock Edition, if you put a fish inside of a moving water source like this, then if it stays in the same place idle long enough, its swimming animation will infinitely speed up, until, as you can see, we get some pretty wild results. But it's worth mentioning that no matter how much speed it builds up, as soon as the fish actually moves a block, then its animation goes back to normal. So if you're trying to build up speed for 12 hours, you might want to look somewhere else. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?